Daniela te dice quiero sexo contigo.
¿Ahora?
Ahora sí.
No.
¿Eh?
No.
Why?
Because y'all are married, bro.
Awkward. That's not usually the sort of question your husband asks your ex-boyfriend. Yohan is clearly out to cause trouble. He wants to make good on his threats that there would be consequences for Danielle's actions. He wants to humiliate his wife, and it's not a good look.
Tú quieres humiliado y es porque tú necesitas poder. And no me gusta eso.
Now, before we dive into Yohan's complicated psyche, let's find out what we've got here. So, we left Danielle last week, completely disregarding Yohan's feelings and going on a boat with her ex. When we join them again in this episode, Yohan is at home stewing over what's just happened, while Danielle remains adamant this isn't an issue. In fact, she's confident she'll be able to make it up to Yohan.
I really want Yohan to be able to talk to me about my meeting with Taylen today, and I think that if I cook for him, maybe he'll appreciate the gesture and get into the right mindset to be able to have this conversation in an effective way.
I know they say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, and maybe for Yohan that's more applicable than for most, but I feel like it's gonna take more than a home-cooked meal to make it up to Yohan. Yohan feels like Danielle puts others ahead of him.
Mi esposa está primero, mis amigos no, pero tus amigos es primero que yo.
This isn't the first time we've heard him say that. It's clearly something that he believes, and it's playing on his mind. So it's left to Danielle to try and reassure him that that's not the case. If her friends came first, she wouldn't be in the DR.
No hay amigos here. Mi amigos es más importante. Yo vivo con mis amigos. Yo voy a mi país cuando mi amigos es más importante, pero estoy aquí con mi esposo.
And sure, that may well be the case, Danielle. You may not have many friends in DR, if any at all. I get that. But this isn't about meeting up with a friend. This is about meeting up with an ex, someone you were in a sexual relationship with, someone your husband specifically said he didn't want you to see, yet you chose to go behind his back and see him anyway. It's not a surprise that Yohan is angry and suspicious. He doesn't like what's going on. But Danielle refuses to see Yohan's point of view. In fact, she's more determined than ever to force Yohan to meet Taylen.
Yo pienso que cuando tú conoces Taylen, tú entiendes más. Porque ahora tú piensas, yo quiero una relación con él, pero cuando tú conoces él, tú no piensas.
Why is she so obsessed with getting Yohan to meet Taylen? 2 seasons of her on our screens and we literally hadn't even heard of the guy until a few weeks ago. She's even admitted that they only keep in contact every once in a while. So he can't possibly be that important in her life, can he? It just feels like Danielle's digging her heels in, like a spoilt child, trying her best to force this to happen just because Yohan said no to her.
Taylen was a really important part of my life a few years ago, and we still keep in contact every once in a while just to see how the other one is doing.
Either way, Danielle's persistence, or maybe her food, seems to have had the desired effect, because although he's reluctant, Yohan finally agrees to meet with Taylen.
Okay. Quiero terminar de conocer a tu amigo.
I can't believe that after a week of arguing and holding his own, Yohan has now caved. It feels like this is starting to become a pattern. They'll argue incessantly, but eventually Danielle will always get her way. But that's unsustainable. Eventually that is going to take a toll on Yohan. Perhaps it already has. So why exactly was it that Yohan had this change of heart? Well, I think what he says next is very telling. This comes from a place of distrust.
Voy a quedarme sentado cuando un hombre que yo no conozco viene a janguear con mi mujer solo. Yo necesito ver qué es lo que está pasando de verdad.
So when we join them the next day at a beachside bar, it becomes immediately apparent that this is going to descend into a testosterone-fueled pissing contest. Within seconds of seeing Taylen, Yohan is already taking shots.
Veo a Taylen llegando con pantalones rosados, camisa rosada. Es lo que parece un flamenco con esa ropa. Yo no me vestiré así ni muerto.
Look, I'm with Yohan on this one. I'm not a huge fan of this outfit on Taylen. but why do I get the feeling that this isn't going to be one of Yohan's better moments? We know that when he feels wronged, Yohan can be quite mean and petty, like at his surprise birthday party, for example. Danielle did a nice deed for him, but he just refused to thank her. So the question is he about to showcase that side of himself to a complete stranger?
So,
Danielle, Taylen, it was you guys that were so desperate for this meeting. How about you take control of the conversation here? I'm not really sure what Danielle was expecting from having her most recent ex-boyfriend and her current husband meet up. Of course it was going to be awkward, and after an extremely uncomfortable start, Yohan steps up to the plate and starts a conversation, with Danielle acting as the translator.
It's hard to truly grasp someone's energy and their vibe when you can't have a real conversation with them without someone being like the middleman or a translator.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing Danielle probably should have thought about before organising this. When Yohan met Danielle's other friend, at least they could speak the same language. And she wasn't an ex. Believe it or not, that makes a world of difference. But even then, I seem to remember that conversation getting pretty personal too, just like this one is about to.
Okay, come on, stand up.
Stand up.
Hey.
¿por qué? Let me do it.
How
Say cinco.
6'5".
Say cinco.
6'5".
Yohan's a smiling assassin. He might look like he's joking around here, but this is an attempt at intimidation. He is in the mood to start some trouble today. And while I can't help but think that Danielle has brought this on herself, it is also a bit disappointing to see Yohan do this, because ultimately it just shows how insecure he is. Well done, you're taller than Taylen. Like, what does that actually prove? And the worst part of this all is that Danielle is supposed to be a prize. No thank you.
¿Cuánto tu calza?
Well, how big are your feet?
14.
14.
Ah,
Sí.
y yo. Sí. Daniela le gusta hombre con pene grande.
Wow, that's a very inappropriate comment to make.
Whoa.
It definitely feels like Yohan is still angry with Danielle, and now he wants to humiliate her in front of someone she knows. It's like he knew exactly what Danielle wanted out of this meeting, so he's determined to do the complete opposite. Now, it's Yohan coming across as a spoilt child. He's determined to make this whole experience as awkward as possible so that Danielle learns her lesson, so that she never asks him anything like this again.
¿Ustedes, relación, es un problema?
No hablo de mi relación con él contigo, porque no es apropiado.
Is Yohan being a total jerk? Yes. But it's hilarious how Danielle is suddenly so concerned about what's appropriate or not. Where was that concern when Yohan mentioned how inappropriate it was for her to hang out with her ex in his culture? Yohan's clearly been sitting on a lot of frustration with Danielle, and it seems like he's using this lunch to take it out on her. Taylen is just collateral damage.
Entonces ella te interesa como mujer aún todavía.
But as a relationship, no.
No.
I have no interest
Really?
in rekindling that. No.
Really?
Really.
Sorry, Yohan, but she's all yours. I don't think there's as much competition for Danielle as you might think there is. If I was Danielle, I'd feel a little offended by just how sure Taylen is he'd never want to rekindle things with her. The truth is, it's petty Yohan who's out today, and he's taking no prisoners. Oh, so Danielle wanted him to meet her friend and ask questions, did she? Okay, well, that's exactly what he's gonna give her.
Daniela te dice quiero sexo contigo.
Ahora?
Ahora sí.
No. No.
Why?
Because y'all are married, bro.
That's a correct answer, bro, but I'm not sure that's necessarily going to allay all of Yohan's fears. You see, if marriage is the only thing that's stopping Taylen, that might mean that the attraction is still there, and that is what seems to be playing on Yohan's mind. Taylen obviously picks up on Yohan's insecurity, so he asks him point blank, do you even trust your wife? Something I'm actually beginning to really question too.
Sometimes I do things that break the trust.
Sí, a veces.
¿Qué?
Cosa. Tú dices una cosa y tú me demuestras otra.
Yo?
Claro.
Yohan seems to be torturing himself with the idea that Danielle might cheat on him. Now, don't get me wrong, Danielle has a lot of really unbearable qualities. She's manipulative, she's controlling, she's patronising. Yes, she's all of the above. But she hasn't really given us any impression that she's got a wandering eye. I mean, what is Yohan referring to here? Is he talking about being cheated on? I can't quite work it out. Maybe he's talking about how Danielle changed her mind about taking him to the States. That must have broken his trust. But the conversation has now taken a very serious turn, and Danielle has started crying.
Tú quieres humiliado y es porque tú necesitas poder. And no me gusta eso.
I think Danielle is actually spot on with this, but what she can't see is that it's because of her that Yohan is acting out and feeling so powerless in this relationship. Her constant emasculation and degradation of his person has left him lashing out in a really immature way. But it's not just his problem, they're both at fault. The problem is Danielle being Danielle, she refuses to look inward. The fault must always lie with someone else.
Any husband who is going out of his way to make his wife feel that way is not a husband that has unconditional love for her. Lo siento. I'm sorry.
Isn't it funny? Taylen has already got more sorries out of Danielle than Yohan ever has. I think Yohan has really let himself down today. I'm guessing when he looks back on this, he'll probably feel ashamed of how he's acted. But the question is being with Danielle making Yohan into a worse version of himself?